and that is a $2 trillion milestone. Apple's market cap crossing that incredible level for the first time today comes just 2 years after Apple made history as America's first $1 trillion company. But let's just put Apple's market cap into a little perspective, shall we? It's now worth as much as nearly 3 Facebooks, about 6 Teslas, and more than 8.5 Disneys. Guy Adami, they say that age ain't nothing but a number. Is the market cap? Does it matter?
Well, I hope that's true about age, Brian, as you know, because obviously I'm not getting any younger. I think it is just a number. And, but I got to say this. A few years ago we had James Altucher on the show. It's probably more than a few now. And he actually said Apple will be a $1 trillion company. And I remember somewhat scoffing at him. And he was probably laughed at by a lot of other people as well. Now, here we are at $2 trillion. It does become just a number. But for perspective, you mentioned a few things. Let's mention a few more. I mean, U.S. GDP is what, $21 trillion? You're talking about a company that's now 9% of U.S. GDP in terms of numbers. That's pretty remarkable. And since they reported earnings, think about this, and kudos to Dan Nathan, they probably added $400 billion to their market cap. And what is that, 9 or 10 trading days? That's bigger than all but probably 10 or 11 publicly traded companies out there. The numbers are staggering. So good for Apple. It's amazing. But I mentioned this quickly as well. Go back to the fall of 2018. Stock made an all-time high at the time of 225. Within a month, it was trading 140. And just go back to this past February, stock made an all-time high of 325. And within a month, it was trading down to 220 or so. This stock does move to the downside as well. It's done it in the past, and my sense, it's going to do it again in the future.
Tim, what do you think?
Well, so, guys gave you all the numbers from the stock charts and why this has been so extraordinary. They say it's, hardest to make your first million, and it was certainly hard to get to the first $1 trillion company, and yet it's taken 2 years to quickly double that, and even more extraordinary in between from COVID. But the things I would point out about Apple that are the drivers, they are 3 things. First of all, it's a services company that is growing in the middle of a hardware company. If it's a $60 billion services business and you put a 14, 15 multiple on it. I mean, the services business alone, arguably, is close to a $1 trillion company. I know that seems extreme, but that's exactly what's going on with this valuation. The second is that 5G is an upgrade cycle that I think people are underestimating, although maybe the stock is not. But 350 of roughly 950 million Apple phones that are out there are going to upgrade. There's no question about it. And in terms of winners and losers from COVID, well, guess what? Apple may be one of the biggest winners, even though it's not just really services. I mean, think about what's going on in this cycle of back to school, whether it's MacBooks, whether it's iPads, whether it's AirPods, their wearables business. All these things have gone through multiple holiday seasons in the last 4 months, and we haven't even gotten to the holiday season. Oh, and throw in capital markets. So you wonder why the stock has moved. Those are the reasons, and those are reasons why it doesn't have to fall out of bed here.
Yeah, we'll see. I mean, certainly all those same reasons. And by the way, Bonwin, I'll throw in back to school. And you may think that's crazy. Every day we're hearing more kids are going virtually. And listen, the kids of the parents who've got some money, upper middle class, wealthy, whatever, you know what they're going to do? They're going to deck out their rooms with iPads and MacBooks and make sure that if they're on Zoom, they could have 2 sort of holiday seasons at Apple, if you will, the holidays, and everybody buying all their gear because they're probably not going to go back to school. But does the stock get ahead of itself in terms of valuation?
A good point. And again, the valuation question seems to be the one that persists. I think we've all gotten on here at one point and said, listen, I don't really think it's about valuation at this point. Previously, we talked about how strong their balance sheets were, free cash flow generation. Tim and Dan, Guy, they've all done wonderful jobs of speaking about the different verticals here, as well as how the service business is expanding and likely going to lead into multiple expansion. Sure, I mean, you have to take into consideration that the stock does trade choppy at times, and those would be the entry points for me. I'd look at technical levels that make sense to kind of reload. As far as the integration of the system, I think that's probably the one thing that the other guys haven't talked about. The integration of the system, whether it be iPad, iPhone, the iWatch, Apple TV, all of those things are integrated. That coupled with the 5G rollout, yeah, I mean, I just don't. I'm the youngest guy here, but I'm young and dumb, but smart enough to know you don't get in front of freight trains, and I am not stepping in front of this one.
Well, here's the thing. So we're talking about this as it's the first company to ever reach a $2 trillion market cap company in the world. And like Guy said, it's gained $400 billion in market cap since it released its earnings. So if you talk about what expectations are for a 5G rollout, I'd say they're pretty well entrenched in there. If you talk about what the expectations are for an extraordinary back to school, again, I would say pretty well entrenched in that recent move. Here's one thing that we haven't even brought up just yet. China. I've long thought that Apple would be the last battle fought in our trade war, and now this really what's turned into a pretty hot cold war with us in China. When you think about what's going on there, forget about the fact that Apple hasn't grown its iPhone units in the last couple years meaningfully. Its sales have obviously been flat for the last few years. So you talk about this services business, yeah, it's really important. But here's the thing. Apple's market share in iPhone units has dropped in China. Apple's revenue has dropped in China over the last 5 years by like 20% or so. So when you think about what the Chinese might be able to do with the App Store, you think about the potential regulation that we have coming from the the EU and here, then you have some sort of issues with this growth and this multiple expansion. By the way, the multiple has expanded. It's doubled in the last 2 years, 2 years that the stock actually hasn't grown its earnings. So when you put it all together, to me, at this point, I just don't see how you put fresh money to work right here in the name. Now, obviously, I've been skeptical that this expansion as far as multiple makes any sense. I want to make one last point, though. Here's a company whose gross margins have been basically 50 basis points on either side of 38% for the last 5 years. So if you're telling me that service is going to help grow that margin, well, it's telling me also that hardware margins are coming in pretty hard. And if you're not growing units and you have some issues potentially in China with market share going lower, I'd say to myself, there's plenty of headwinds ahead.
Here's the amazing thing about the iPhone in China, guys. The iPhone costs 1/4 of the average yearly income of a Chinese worker. Their income is about $5,000 a year on average. The iPhone is the same price as it is here. You think about that. You wonder how big the market is. Can you imagine if the iPhone was $12,000 here? That's basically the equivalent. By the way, Apple's target price, $35 below where this. It doesn't matter, does it, Tim? It doesn't seem to matter to anybody.
Well, I don't think it's mattered. I mean, that's an important point, and we saw where Apple lost a lot of ground 4 years ago with Android and cheaper, frankly, local hardware manufacturers who were doing something almost as good. But that statistic has been out there for a long time, and everyone's pointing out why the stock has had a great run and why it can't continue, yet it seems to go higher.